Of every job in Henry VIII's Tudor court, one looked like a reward and was actually a quiet death sentence. The king's poison taster. You eat first, so he doesn't die.
Today you're living one day in that job, in the heart of Tudor England, the rituals, the fear, and the law Henry passed that made poisoners die in a way you won't believe.
Welcome to Crownology. If you love this kind of royal history, gently tap that like button, please.
Let's open the archives.
Here's the first thing you need to understand. You did not apply for this. Nobody walks into the Tudor court and asks to be the person who finds out whether the soup is deadly. The job is handed to you, and it's handed to you precisely because the king trusts you. That's the trap. Trust at his court is a leash.
And the role is old, far older than England itself. The Romans had a title for the servant who tasted the emperor's food before he did, the praegastator, the one who tastes first. A grand Latin word for a very simple idea, the person who dies first.
Saying no to Henry VIII is not really a thing people do and keep their heads attached. So you bow, you smile, you call it the honor of your life, and somewhere in the back of your skull, a small voice points out your new job description is essentially die instead of the king.
Now, the work itself. Picture the kitchens of the Hampton court, one of Henry's grandest palaces, with the kitchens built to feed hundreds at a time. Every meal the king eats, you eat first. And these are not small meals. His table can carry dozens of dishes in a single setting. Meat after meat, sauces, fine bread, wine.
Before any of it reaches him, it runs the gauntlet. The food is guarded from the kitchen all the way to the hall. Officials handle it under watch, hands checked, nobody left alone with the plate, and at the very end of the chain stands you, with a spoon and a very dry mouth.
You taste a little of this, a little of that. The wine gets its own ceremony, the cup checked, then tasted before it ever touches the royal lips. Then, and only then, does the most powerful man in England pick up his knife.
You do this every single day. When you're sick, when you barely slept, the morning after a fight with someone who works in the kitchen, which honestly is the part that should worry you the most.
And here's where the job gets genuinely cruel. You'd think tasting the food protects the king. Sometimes it does. If someone slips in something fast and violent, you'll know. You'll be the one clutching the table while Henry calmly waits for a different plate.
But the clever poisons don't work like that. The favorite of the age was arsenic, and arsenic is a nightmare for the tester. No taste, no smell, no color, and the symptoms? Cramps, sickness, fever, look exactly like a bad meal or a passing illness.
The smart way to use it was slow, a small dose again and again, over days or weeks, until a healthy man simply fades. You could taste every dish for a year and never catch a poison like that, because on a single day it tastes like nothing at all.
So you're not really a shield. You're an early warning system that only goes off for the amateurs. The professionals, the one using arsenic the patient way, you'd never see coming, neither with the king.
So how does the court protect itself from the poisons you can't taste? With magic. Genuinely. Renaissance courts spent small fortunes on objects they believed that could sniff out venom.
There was actually something called a unicorn horn, almost always a narwhal tusk sold at a spectacular markup, supposed to sweat or change color near the poison.
There were bezoar's stones, hard little lumps pulled from the stomachs of goats or other animals, and they dropped them into the wine to neutralize anything nasty. But none of it worked. Not against arsenic, not against anything. So picture your day. You're risking your life on every bite. The king is trusting a goat stone to keep him breathing, and everyone at the highest table in the land agrees this is a perfectly sensible system. Now, it isn't all doom, and this is the part that keeps people in the role. Standing this close to the king in court is in terms gold.
If you doubt that, look at the job that sounds even worse than yours. The groom of the stool. The servant whose duties include helping the king at the toilet. That humiliating closeness made him one of the most trusted, most powerful men in the entire kingdom. Proximity to the king is power.
The people who handle Henry's food, his cup, his private rooms, are not nobodies. They're the tight ring around the most powerful person in the country. Whisper the right thing at the right moment and you can shape who rises and who falls. A trusted servant near the king could end up wealthy, titled, and set up for life.
So yes, the job might kill you, but if it doesn't, it could make you. The gamble, die young or rise high, is exactly why someone always says yes. But you didn't really have a choice anyway.
And then there are the days the fear stops being theoretical. In 1531, in the household of John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester, a cook named Richard Roose slipped something into the pottage. The thick porridge served to the household and to the poor waiting at the gate. People fell violently ill. The bishop happened not to eat it that day, which is the only reason this isn't his story.
And here's where a kitchen tragedy turns into a court intrigue. Fisher was no ordinary bishop. He was Catherine of Aragon's fiercest defender, the loudest churchman standing against Henry's divorce and his marriage to Anne Boleyn. So at the time, some whispered that this was no accident at all, and the Boleyn faction wanted Fisher silenced. True or not, Henry's reaction was very real.
King Henry was genuinely terrified of poison, and this landed far too close to a powerful man. So a brand new law was rushed through Parliament, the Act for Poisoning, that made murder by poison an act of high treason. And the punishment Henry chose was specific. Not hanging, not the axe, boiling.
Richard Roose was taken to Smithfield and boiled to death in public in front of the crowd. He reportedly swore he'd only meant to make them sick, a prank gone wrong, not murder. But it didn't save him.
This is the world where you're tasting food in, one where the king is so frightened of poison that he will literally cook a man alive to prove a point. And if poisoning ever happened on your watch, even if you survive the meal yourself, ask yourself, who stands closest to the food? Who gets questioned first?
But here's the truth that makes the whole job almost unbearable once you finally see it. The thing most likely to poison the king's table wasn't a hidden assassin at all. It was the food.
The cooking pots could leach metal straight into the meal, and the sweeteners were worse. Cheap or sour wine was often softened with lead, a substance that they actually called sugar of lead, or lead acetate, because it makes anything taste rich and sweet while it quietly poisoned everyone who drank it.
The water was filthy, meat turned in the heat because they didn't refrigerate it. A great deal of what looked like poisoning in those centuries was probably spoilage, or lead, or plain disease that everyone preferred to blame on a villain or a vial.
So you, the brave taster, spend your life braced for a murderer, while the real killer is simmering in the pot on plain sight, slow and patient, and your one little spoonful is nowhere near enough to save anyone from it.
You're guarding the front door while the danger seeps up through the floor.
So yeah, it sucks to be the king's poison taster. You take a job you can't refuse, from a king you can't say no to. You risk your life at every meal against the fast poisons, while the slow, clever ones, the arsenic, the lead, slide straight past your tongue.
You're protected by a narwhal tusk and a goat stone. You live in the Tudor court where poisoning is feared so deeply that the punishment is being boiled alive, and the deadliest thing in the room the entire time is the cooking itself.
The honor of your life, they said. Welcome to Crownology. Hit that subscribe button.